The video you're about to watch, I interview Craig Main. Now, Craig is somebody that I met approximately 2 years ago when I was doing my cycling journey across the United States. And it was actually him and his son Hart that I met on the C&O towpath, which is popular by cyclists and by hikers. And it happened to be early one morning when we were trying to get across a fallen tree that was huge. We ended up getting off our bikes, taking all the gear, all the bags off our bikes, with one person climbing over the tree and then handing the bikes over, only to put our bags back on, have a short chat before the sky opened up and started raining, and we all started riding once again. And they took off like crazy, so they were moving ahead. Anyways, we have followed each other on YouTube. We followed each other on Facebook. I've been on his podcast, but I think what you're going to enjoy in this, it's not just about a bicycle adventure. It's about understanding the challenges and the struggles of life. And Craig's going to share about this relative to a trip that he was planning to do to get across the United States. It was a big trip and he's going to share all about that. But what will probably resonate with you is how everything that we all do to move and to take action and to go after our dreams, our desires, and our goals, no matter how big or how small, we do have to be humble and we do have to realize that sometimes life is going to give us challenges. So, with no further ado, here's Craig. Well, Craig Main, so happy that you're finally on the podcast. I know I've been on yours, and now you get to be on mine.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and again, thank you for joining ours. It's yeah, they're a lot of fun. They really are.
Oh yeah. Well, we made our initial, connection climbing over a huge oak tree or some tree. I don't know what it was, and it was on the C&O Canal Trail, and you and your son Hart were helping me get my bike over, and we are getting your bikes over. And I think it started even raining. Was it start raining right after that
It
too?
had, yeah,
Yeah.
it had started. Yeah, yep.
And we've stayed in touch ever since. And I really, for me, when it comes to raising the consciousness of humanity, I believe that we all have our expression of activity, the things that we like to do, the things that whatever it is that we're passionate about. Cycling, of course, is one of my passions. It's one of your passions. And more than that, it's the bike packing aspect of that. And when I realized that you were going to be cycling across the US, which is what we're going to talk about here, or the attempt to do that, I feel like, you know what? We all need to dream big. It doesn't matter how it turns out, we all need to dream big. We all need to take that initial step. And so I want to ask you some basic questions first and then
Sure.
lean into your bike trip. How long have you been cycling for?
So I've been cycling, past obviously when you're a kid, right? Everybody rides a bike, right?
Yep.
And I grew up out kind of in the country, and we were on a busy road, so we didn't ride on the road, but we had a long driveway, right? So that was pretty much the cycling when you were a child, right?
Yeah.
But past that, I started cycling about 16 years ago. Maybe it's even longer than that now. Maybe we're at 17 or 18. But I really got back into cycling or started cycling when my kids were cycling.
Okay.
'Cause we again we lived on a road with a cul-de-sac, so you're riding down the cul-de-sac, riding around, and then my two oldest got into doing kid triathlons,
Hmm.
and in the kid triathlon, you're swimming about 400 yards, you're biking about somewhere between 8 and 12 miles, depending upon what age you are, and you're running anywhere between a half mile and a mile. And to be good at, you know, 8 to 12 miles, you can't do that in your driveway. you
Yeah, that's right.
you've either got to be out on a trail or you've got to be out on the road. And so, we were they certainly weren't super competitive, right? But they, they were decent at it, right? And they had played plenty of sports. They knew that, like, hey, if we want to be good at this, we got to practice, right? And so they started riding. I had an old mountain bike that I was riding with them, and we were on roads, and in the small town and out in the country. Um, and then as they got a little older and they got a lot better, I had to get a road bike because I couldn't keep up with them on my mountain bike. So that's kind of where my cycling restarted in my life.
Nice. And of course, the adventure of bike packing kind of led into that as well.
Yeah, so we started bike packing. So my oldest son, who you met when we were crossing the tree, he really got into distance, right? Whether
Hmm.
that be running distance or cycling distance. And I worked with a guy who had ridden an event here in Ohio. It's called GOBA, which is the Great Ohio Bicycle Adventure,
Hmm.
and it's a week long, basically a week long bike packing. Uh, and they would, you put all your stuff on a truck, right? So you're not carrying your stuff with you, right? But you're
Yep.
cycling from town to town. You get there, the truck's there, your stuff's there. You camp, get up, right? Do it again. And we did that for about 6 years, and it was
Hmm.
a lot of fun. The 50 miles were good. It was about between 50 and 60 miles a day. And as he got a little older, the distances didn't really challenge him like they did initially. And we kind of started to repeat towns because they move it
Okay.
around the state every year, right? So we started repeating towns, and he's like, why don't we go try to do our own thing? And so at that point, we started doing some research, and our first, sole on our own trip, carrying all of our stuff with us,
Yep.
was Pittsburgh to DC. So that was not the time that we met, right? That was
Yep.
it was that was several years before that. But we rode from Pittsburgh to DC, and that was that, and I think we've only missed 1 year since. We've every single year we've done some sort of bike packing trip.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you must have the same love and passion that I relate to. It's the cycling, it's the outdoors, it's the camping element. I love that. And then are you as far as like bikes now, this is the big question, Craig. Hopefully your wife's not listening, but how many bikes do you actually own and how much have you invested?
So I still have my old mountain bike that I had
Okay.
originally, and that's what I started doing most of my bike packing on.
Yeah.
And that thing hung in the garage for quite some time, as the kids got old, or the kids were young, right? And I had it before the kids were born. Um, and then broke it back out when we started bike packing,
Yep.
and it's got more miles on it in that bike packing time frame that it had, before that. But so I've got that. I've still got that, and then I've got a road bike,
Hmm.
and then also I have a couple years ago I bought a nice giant gravel bike.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so I have three, but I will tell you that recently here in town they've started a mountain bike Monday, and I currently ride the oldest and least functional mountain bike in the entire group. So the bike shop is calling quite in my head, anyways. Right? It's like I'm like, boy, I really need to. I need a bike with front suspension at a minimum. So
So
um,
I predict you're going to get a new bike, but I also predict you're not going to get rid of the old one because they're like old
no,
friends.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. No, it at a minimum it'll hang in the garage,
Yeah.
and as not upside down, but as a display piece because yeah, there's a ton of memories on that bike. Um, and when I decided I didn't need that, so we were on a bike trip around Lake Erie,
Yep.
and so it was the longest trip we had taken at that point. It was 11 days, and we started in Cleveland and we rode around Lake Erie. We touched two of the other Great Lakes.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, it was a really nice trip. But we were sitting at a campground in Canada,
Yep.
and we were waiting. I don't know. We were sitting on a park bench or something or whatever, and we were waiting for this thing to start at the campground. And there was a playground next to us, right? and this little kid who was probably 8 or 9 years old. And my old style mountain bike is a Raleigh M20. Okay, and
Okay, yep,
that's back when Raleigh was was not a big box store
yeah.
brand, right? Yeah. So anyway, so we're sitting there, and this kid comes riding up to the playground on a Raleigh M50, and I look at my son and I go, I need a new bike.
Yeah, yeah, right.
This 8-year-old's riding this next version of my bike. Maybe I shouldn't be riding this thing.
Maybe it's time to give it up. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, a couple years later I got the giant gravel bike. So, and that's what I rode across the country or tried to
Okay,
ride.
I was going to ask you that. And is that the same bike when we had hurdled them over the
Yes.
trees?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually a very, very nice bike. So I would say much lighter than the one I was on. So yeah. So let's now move forward to you've got this cycling background. You've been doing, the cycling, the bike packing events with uh with your son, and you got all that experience and you've got the adventure, under your belt and everything else. And I remember initially seeing some of your planning that you shared a little bit about your bike packing trip that you're going to do across the country. And I actually started following you on Facebook. But tell me a little bit about, okay, what went into that, and because there's a lot of planning, right? What
Sure.
went
Yeah.
into to that, and then as you get forward into that, how far did you go? Because I know you shared with me that you didn't quite complete what you wanted
Correct.
to achieve, but honestly, just to get started, just to do something like that is amazing, anyways. But how far did you go, miles, days, and then maybe share a little bit about, where were some of the difficult maybe moments and stuff
Sure.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So so the dream, so to speak, kind of started actually back in the Goba days because
Mhm.
which is the Great Ohio Bicycle Fisher. There were people on that trip that I learned to or that I got to know that had cycled across the country. And I think that's really my first reference of certainly of knowing anyone who had ever done it, but
Yeah.
just kind of hearing that like, wow, that's a thing, right? Like that's and from that point on, I was fascinated, right?
Mm.
And as time went on, so I would say about 5 years before I took my trip, it really hit me. I'm like, this is absolutely something I want to do, right?
Yeah.
We had done the week-long bike packing trips year after year after year. I felt that like, okay, I can do this, right? Like I've got all the tools, right? The whole thing. Um, and it was, and at that point, I'd made up my mind. My first year of retirement,
Mhm.
I was when I turned 65, that was going to be, I was going to leave the day after, right? Kind of was in
Yep.
my mind, right? That was my thing. I was going to ride across the country. And so I'm 55 now. Okay. So I was
I was gonna
54.
say you're not 65, so
I'm
like,
not 65 yet. Yeah, no. So, but um a couple years, so when I was 50, 52, 53, my dad passed away.
okay.
And that was that that really, really hit me hard, right?
Yeah.
Very, very okay. He was 82, right? So he had lived a good long life, right? But he went very, very quickly and it just wasn't expected, right? So, um, in his passing, he and mom were both savers. Mom had passed 5 years ago and he left us enough money that I could pay off the house.
Oh, nice.
So we paid off the house. And we really at that point, and we've Amy and I have always tried to be pretty conservative,
Mm.
and we didn't, we didn't have any reoccurring bills, and it just hit me. I'm like, I got to go now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm, will I be able to when I'm 65, right? Like
Yep.
physically, you don't
Yep.
know. You just don't know. And you're on Facebook and you're seeing these people that you haven't known, you've known, at high school, but you really haven't kept up with, right? And you're like,
Yep.
oh, well, this guy passed away. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you don't know, right? You just don't
Yeah.
know. You never know. And so I really kind of seized the opportunity and I started, okay, like I got to start planning this, right? So I started planning a couple years in advance And part of the planning process was, or part of the 2 year lead time of planning was, I'm gonna have to convince my wife, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to convince her, right? So,
Did
like,
you even bring it up at all, like in conversation over dinner or anything? Like,
the first time I brought it up, so again, about 2 years out when I started planning, the
yeah,
first time I brought it up, she said, "Yes, you absolutely should go."
nice.
Like immediately. And I was like, "Oh, like cool. Yeah." Like
Yeah.
she's right. So, she and even through the trip, and we've known each other forever, right? We literally I've known her since she was in the 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
So we've known each other forever. There's no skeletons in anybody's closets, right? So, um, but she knows me. It was a reminder as to how well she knows me, right? Just
Yeah.
even that comment as well as through the trip. So, but anyway, so I started planning a couple years in advance, and to be honest, that was too long.
Hmm.
I
Overplanned.
overplanned, which set expectations in my mind of where I should have been at certain points of time. And when I didn't make those points every day, or,
Yep.
a particular given day, it was a failure, right? It was like, man,
Okay.
okay, now I'm not there. Now I've got to do this, right? And
Yeah.
and we're talking like day 5, right? Like the first 4 days,
Oh boy.
day 5, I'm like, wow, I can't climb this, 5,700 feet that I was expecting.
Reality check. Yeah.
Exactly right. How am I going to do tomorrow's at 6,000? Well, guess what? I didn't do tomorrow's either, right? And
Yeah.
so, and the other big mistake I had made was I was going to be gone for 4 months
Okay.
because this wasn't a. I was using some of the adventure cycling routes, but I was connecting them together that
I
with
know
routes that
you
I had
shared
taken.
like you were going to do part of the Great Divide Mountain Bike ride. So
Right,
I'm like,
right.
that's going like this, Craig,
Yeah,
not like
right.
this. So it's like, how is he going to get across country? I'm like,
Yeah. And what kind of led to that was I had this image in my mind of getting my picture taken with my bike in front of all of these iconic places across the country,
uh,
that people would see that picture and know exactly where I was at.
hmm.
Right? So the reason I started in San Francisco was one of those pictures was with the Golden Gate Bridge, right? That was
And
day one.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I had set so I'd made the route certainly way longer than it needed to be.
Yeah.
It was going to be like 4,300 miles or something like that. Um, and then because I was going to be gone for so long, I had set times to meet people at certain places. So again, I get behind schedule, and now
Hmm.
I'm pushing to try to meet people, and then I'm canceling them and trying to move their date. It,
Yeah.
that was a huge mistake, right?
Yeah.
That was an absolutely huge mistake. So, anyways, that was kind of where I started. That the plan was, and I had this thing planned out where I literally had a spreadsheet where I'm like, okay, how much water I got to take on each day.
Hmm.
And it's just silly, right? That I mean, it was almost nervous energy spent time planning in the winter, right? Is kind of what it was. When
And
I
you
should
don't
have.
want to have nervous energy with a passion, right? With a joy, like riding a bike. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what happened, and I literally looked at every mile that I could look at on Google Street View, right? So just again, nervous energy, trying to plan, trying to figure out can I ride on this road, right? That type of thing. And so I would say I definitely overplanned.
Yeah. So the biggest lessons that you felt probably from all of this was over planning and having an expectation that goes along with that element of detailed planning, right? Because we
Right.
always, and then when you don't meet that, I mean, this is true. Everybody has, it could be in anything, right? It could be a business goal. It could be a financial goal. It could be, you think about anything that somebody's trying to achieve in life. Sometimes we all do that.
Yeah.
We miss our mark on day one or whatever, so we start to then it becomes a mental thing and we feel defeated when we really should be in our joy because it's our joy and our passion. And it's the enjoyment of doing the experience. Then,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the
yeah,
reality is, every single thing that I did, I had the ability to do,
yep,
right? But there's and I knew this was going to happen, and Hart had mentioned before I left, right, a couple times that, hey, remember this, right? You're out there by yourself, riding alone.
yeah,
There's a ton of things that go through your head, right? You're just,
yeah,
you know, and again, when you're behind the eight ball, right, you get behind your own schedule, which doesn't matter. I had 4 months. It didn't matter, right?
yeah,
I had days to burn. I had scheduled in 10 rest days, 10 or 12 rest days, and like 5 or 6 weather days, right?
yep,
The only reason one day behind mattered was because I had scheduled dates to meet people along the way,
yeah.
and they were coming from Ohio, right? So they're traveling, right? And those types of things. So it really, it was all mental. It was
How
all mental.
far did you get? Like, how many days, and where was the moment where you finally said, this is it?
Yeah. So I rode for 6 weeks,
Oh, that's
and
pretty good.
ended up being, I think I physically rode like 32 or 35 days, something like that, right? Number of days on the bike.
Okay,
Um, it
nice.
was it was 1,350 miles. So I
That's good.
got Yeah, so I got to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, um, from San Francisco, and the key piece to Steamboat was so I had planned to stop there for a week because my wife was coming out, right? And we were gonna do a vacation basically, right? And explore in the area. So I was there a week, but then as soon as she left, my son was coming out,
Mm.
and we were gonna ride the Great Divide mountain bike route, right? At least
Okay,
4 days, 4 or 5 days of it, right? Was
yep.
our goal. And because the other thing I didn't want to miss was I didn't want to miss our week of riding together, right? So
Ah,
that was it, and that's kind of been on his bucket list for a while. So that seemed kind of perfect for me. The reality was I spent 2 solid weeks not really moving, like physically moving forward on the path that I had created. Right
okay.
now, we were riding. We rode out. We rode out and ended up bringing a U-Haul back. But the plan was to ride out and back. Right. So I was basically 2 solid weeks in the same spot.
Mm.
And when he and I had ridden, we had ridden the Empire State Trail in New York one
Yep,
year, and we came across a guy who was crossing the country, and he was on the back end of his trip, and and we were talking, and he had ridden like the northern part of the adventure cycling route, right on the
yep,
okay, and I asked him, I said, hey, have you ever done? And he's like, and he had just done week-long trips, right? And I
yep.
said, would you ever do this again? He's like, oh no, no way, right? and so we were talking about what was hard, and he said when I hit the Great Lakes, he said I
Mm.
spent 350 miles traveling south. He goes,
Mm.
I didn't feel like I was getting any closer to my end destination.
Yeah, because that's on the northern tier. In the
Yeah,
northern tier, that route does that.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
he was going to Bar Harbor, Maine, right? So he said it was really mentally difficult, And as I'm struggling through these things, I'm referencing all these things that all of these people had mentioned to me like years ago or once in a blue, right? I had talked to a guy before I left who has led several ACA adventure ride groups, right?
mm.
And um talking to him, he's like, look, he's like, this is your first time across country. He's like, you don't want to make your own trail. He's like, you take
Yeah,
one of the solid ones, right? Take one of the ones that's proven, right?
yeah,
Buy the maps, right? Blah, 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 right? I'm like, nope, it's maybe my only shot. I'm going to do my own thing, right?
yeah,
And sure enough, right? I'm halfway through it. I'm going, what was I thinking? Right? Like, there's, and I had resources available to me, but the joy you feel when you're out on a ride that's that long, seeing a cyclist come the other way is
yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah,
And I saw a couple, but it wasn't many, right? But if you're out on a mapped route, right, and
yeah.
everybody rides those routes, right, your chances of coming across somebody, right, you partnered up with another person, and rode for a few weeks, right, together, and that's a huge difference.
It is, it's motivational. It's great to meet other people. If you could stop somewhere and grab a cup of coffee and, or at least be on a shoulder of a road that's, safe enough to talk.
Right,
Because when you would see those people, I'm sure you were doing the same thing I was doing. There's a difference between the day rider or the person that's out for a couple hours that only has maybe a little tiny bag under the seat. Yeah,
right.
probably
Yep.
for a spare tire, but the ones that were shaped where they had a little bit of like the bags were sticking out, and you could spot them on the
Oh
horizon.
yeah.
You'd be like,
Yep.
that's a person that's going across the country. And so when I would see, you're right, very few, very few. And I didn't see like I just the one that I ran into that was going in the direction I was going in because most people were going the other direction.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. You're riding, generally, right? You're riding a similar pace that most people would ride, right?
Yeah,
Now, maybe a little different, right? But no one's racing, right? So
yeah,
you're not going to, somebody who leaves 2 weeks before you, you're not going to catch them. Somebody who leaves a week behind you, they're not going to catch you more than likely, right? Unless
yeah,
somebody's taking a bunch of off days. But yeah, going the other direction, right? You're gonna have people coming that way. And
yeah,
yeah, so it's a yeah. But anyway, so that was that was again another mistake I made.
yeah,
I should have gone, okay, I get this chance to do this at 54. I'll take a paved route, or not a paved route, but a planned route, right?
yeah.
I'll do that, right? Maybe when I'm 65, I'll do my own thing, right? But
Sure.
again, I really had this feeling this is a one-time shot, right? Like I've got to make this thing count.
Yeah,
Um, and certain adventures happened and other things, that probably wouldn't have happened on the other, on the other routes. So you can't, it's all second guessing, right? It is
yeah.
what, but
How did you make out mechanically? Did the bike work fine? Did you have any issues? Yeah, I'm sure you had flat tires. Everybody has.
yeah.
But
So the bike worked out well, which was kind of funny because I had that thing for 2 years before we left, and
yeah.
I had squeaky hubs for almost 2 solid years on that bike.
Hmm.
They eventually, and I give all the credit in the world to Giant. They ended up eventually replacing both wheels,
Okay.
both wheel sets, and that fixed it. I think it was, I feel like it was a COVID bike that I bought, right? And there
Yeah.
was just something goofy with it, whatever, right? They had some sort of issue. But yeah, so they replaced them. So I had one flat tire
Yeah.
the entire trip, and it probably couldn't have happened at a better time or a better place to be, again, just super, super lucky. Um, it was it was right after crossed into Utah, and I spent that night in a camping in a Bureau of Land Management area,
Yeah.
which was about a cow pasture. It was
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I just happened to run over something, some sort of jigger or something, right in that field. So that was the only mechanical issue I had, un, except for there was a day, and that was actually the first day going from Nevada into Utah.
Yeah.
I had a bolt that holds the rack onto the bike. I had a bolt shear off.
Oh, I had that happen to me. What did you do?
I had about 80 miles left that day.
You became a MacGyver, right? You had to do
Yeah,
something.
this is what I did. I turned around and
Oh,
I stuck out my
okay.
thumb. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's kind of, you know, the one thing I learned out west, people will not let you die in the desert. If you're willing to stick out your thumb,
Yeah.
people stop. I hitchhiked 3 times across the trip, and I
Yeah.
bet you I did not hitchhike for more than 15 minutes total of those 3 times.
And it typically was somebody with a vehicle that could pick up you and your bike.
Yep. Yep. Some sort of truck, some sort of, camper van. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah. So in the Utah, they were two guys in a camper van that stopped and picked me up, and their names were Craig and Richard.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so Richard is, to me, Richard is my best friend growing up,
And Craig
right?
is you.
That's it. And
Yeah.
Craig is me, right? But Hart's my son's given name is actually Richard, although he
Oh,
goes,
you
yeah,
know what? I don't know about you, but I found so many synchronicities like that.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you for sharing that because there's those magical moments where you get rescued and that person, like you said, your name and then the same name that was the given name for your son.
right, right,
How
right.
how rare is that even that type of
Yeah,
circumstance even going to happen?
yeah, yeah. When they stopped and they introduced themselves, I probably had the dumbest look on my face, and like, really? Does this like I don't know how long it took me to tell them my name was Greg.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. There's so many little connections that happen out there, and that's one big difference between touring with someone and touring alone.
Yeah.
When you're on a bike, whether you're with somebody or not, you're cycling, right? You're
Yeah.
pedaling. Maybe you're talking to that person, but across 50 miles, you might talk to that person for 30 minutes to an hour total, I bet, right?
Yeah.
Across, say 6, 7 hours, right?
Yeah.
Um, but when you're by yourself, every single time you come across somebody and there's something about a bike with panniers on it, it's like a magnet for people, right? They come
Yeah.
up to you and they want to know they want to know where you're going, what you're doing, right? Just, it's yeah, it opens up so many opportunities to talk to people. Um,
Yeah.
if you and I are cycling on a tour, we go into a restaurant to eat lunch or dinner or whatever, we're going to sit down at the table and we're going to talk to each other and whatever, right? And people aren't really going to interrupt us.
Yeah.
You're cycling by yourself. You sit. People are going to come up to you. They're going to talk to you. They're going to ask who you are, what you're doing, and it was literally every day. There was somebody every single day that I had a
Wow.
conversation with that it just made me think, right? Like,
Yeah.
and to the point where I'm like, do you think that person would have told me that story if they'd known they're going to meet me tomorrow? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's almost they
Yeah.
just opened up, and
And
which
that's
is
the best, really.
it
That's the
really is.
best part.
Yeah, and I do a lot of YouTube stuff, or I'm trying to do a lot of YouTube stuff, so I recorded a lot on that. But I'm very conscious about when I come across somebody, I turn that recording device off if it's on,
Yeah.
because I truly feel it changes the narrative.
Yeah.
I really do. When people realize, oh, I'm being recorded, right? They kind of draw in a little bit, right? They don't say the things, I had a guy stop at the top of a mountain pass. He's in a truck and he's pulling a U-Haul trailer, right? And he passes me whatever, right? And 20 minutes later, I get to the top of this pass, right? And the guy's sitting there, and hey, you doing okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm great, thank you, right? He's like, how was the climb, whatever, right? And I'm like, right, oh, good, right? And
Yeah.
he's sitting in his car, right, or sitting in his truck, and he was a cyclist, right? He had toured, right? And he tells me this heart-wrenching story about his wife who passed away like a year and a half ago, right? And he probably wasn't 50, right? I mean, you know,
Wow.
and I'm thinking, like, if this guy knows he's gonna see me tomorrow, is he telling me this story? It just, you
Right.
know, it was just, but it was you know, he was there. He was concerned about my safety, right? Making
Yeah.
sure I was good because he's been in that situation before, and just the conversation about, and I talked to the guy for probably 15 minutes,
Isn't that
and
amazing?
I'm like, hey, yeah, like he's like, okay, well, I'm like, yep, like be safe, have a good time, great, whatever, right? And just, yeah, it's just, and kind of what's I feel a little bad because I was actually recording the pass sign, coming over the pass, right? Because it was right behind his truck, and I I swear I hit my GoPro to turn it off and it didn't turn off. So I have that entire conversation recorded. I didn't know I was being recording. He didn't know he was recording, right? So none of that, again, that drawing in of recording happened, right? Um,
Nice.
yeah, and so again, I've not posted my entire trip yet. I'm working my way through it. Um, and posting kind of 3 or 4 days at a time as I go. But that's when I got going coming up. But when I added it, I just did the very first beginning of the conversation, and then I cut it off, and then
Mm.
usually when I have a conversation with someone like that, when I ride away, I then turn my GoPro back on and I recap, right? Like, hey, I
Yep.
just met this person, this is what they're doing, whatever, right? And try to tell the story because those stories are the best thing about it, right? I mean,
Aren't they? Yeah.
cycling's great, camping's great, like all the stuff, right? Like, there's really no complaint, but meeting the people
Yeah.
is just, and everybody says that, and it's true, right? That's the reason everybody says it, right? Meeting people along the way is incredible.
But you're right about that because they see you as a lone traveler. They are curious about you, where you come from, where you're going, and it opens up true human connection, I guess,
Yep.
because everybody starts to, warmly share, as well as the interest in wanting to know about you. So I like that a lot. And I felt even at campgrounds. Now, so that was the other question I had. Did you do mostly camping, hotels, camping, or warm showers? What was your combination of how you slept that night?
Yeah. So again, back to my planning. My planning was 2 days a week to hotel.
Okay.
So 5 nights of camping, whether that be wild camping or whatever, right? Two night.
Yeah.
Okay. The way it really worked out, only because of availability and just the way it's I had planned to end in a town each night so I could have access to food,
Yep.
right? For the most part. And well, you get to a town, and there's a lot of conversation about, oh, this town in the middle of nowhere out west will let you sleep in their park in the center of town.
Hmm.
Eh, sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
So it really ended up being kind of 50-50 for me. I literally camped 50% of the nights. The other nights I slept inside. I had three, well, I had ended up with three warm showers hosts.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Those are always fun because you get to meet other cyclists.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the guy, the first place that I stayed, the first warm shower host I'd ever used, right? I was actually their first guest.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, yeah. And it was the best meal I had on the entire trip. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got there a little bit after lunch, because it was kind of a short day for me. But it was, so I get there and I'm just talking to a guy and his wife, and I'm talking to them, right, about the trip and all the stuff, right, answering their questions, asking them about what they've done and all this other stuff. And she kind of disappears or whatever. And then I don't know, it's like an hour later, like he looks at his phone. He goes, "Oh," he goes, Annette went to the grocery store. She wants to know what you want for dinner tonight." And I had not had pasta. I was so hungry for pasta. And I said, anything with pasta in it.
Yeah.
And she made a chicken parmesan that I'm not sure I have ever tasted better. Now, part of that is, right, you're hungry because you're out
Yeah.
riding, right, and all this stuff. It seemed like every town I went into, all they did was pizza and burgers, right? So it was like you'd had that it seemed like every night. But yeah, the warm showers experience was really, really good.
Yeah, no, that I found that too. It's just part of the overall experience of meeting these other cyclists and their stories. And I think I think that's a big part of it too. So I would, to those of you who are listening right now, Warm Showers is an app of cyclists supporting cyclists, and check it out. I think it's called warmshowers.org.
Right.
And
Yep.
from what you shared is that couple just they probably just like that minute, let's set up an account, and we set up, boing, oh, this guy named Craig Main's coming tonight. so
So,
so
and I had,
no, so when you were in the camp, so when you did camp, I always loved making coffee in the morning. What was your morning ritual? Did you have the little burner and
yeah,
what?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm not a coffee drinker, and
Okay.
so I'm a tea drinker. I'm not a coffee drinker. But I always had oatmeal with me.
I
So
loved oatmeal. Yeah.
so generally oatmeal was my morning ritual for making for making breakfast. I'd try to get the day before, I'd try to get some sort of like a banana or something like that to put in with it, right?
Mhm.
Always carrying peanut butter so you can mix peanut butter in there as well.
Yep.
And that was one thing I didn't do very well early, um, was I didn't eat enough, right? I don't, I don't wear, a watch that tells me how fast my heart's going and how many calories I'm burning, right? All
Yeah.
that stuff, right? I don't, I track my miles, right? That's really about the only
Yep.
thing I track, right? For this trip, I did track elevation as well, or climb, right? So, but typically I'm not tracking that. But anyways, um, it was so I got sick the sixth sixth day on the trip. I
Okay.
got a really bad sinus infection,
Uh,
and I'm at the highest elevation I'd ever been in my life. Right, I'm in the Sierra Nevadas. Um, I'm climbing, literally doing nothing but climbing for 2 days straight,
yep.
and I'm not hungry because I'm sick. Right,
Yeah.
I'm just my head's full. Right, just like um, and I ended up in South Lake Tahoe. When I got to South Lake Tahoe, I ended up going to the emergency room the next morning.
Mm.
And here I'd referenced earlier about my wife knowing me, really really well, right, and potentially better than I know myself. When I got to South Lake Tahoe, I I had planned a rest day that day anyway, so I was spending 2 nights there.
Yep.
Um, the first night, I wake up in the middle of the night with panic attacks.
Mm.
I have never in my life had a panic attack. I
Really?
am the guy that if someone tells me they have a panic attack, I would probably say, suck it up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and I feel horrible about that now, but I've had them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I woke up 2 or 3 times with a panic attack. Going through my head was, how am I, for some reason, right? How am I going to get across Wyoming? How
Mm.
am I? That was the only state I hadn't Google Street viewed, because my
Okay.
route wasn't viewable through Google Streets,
Mm.
and it was just playing through my head, right? Like, and I'm waking up, can't breathe because of my head cold, whatever, right? And so I text my wife. It's like probably 1 in the morning, so it's 3 or 4 here, right? I said, and one of the big things I did was I turned my phone off as much as I could through the whole trip.
Okay.
And my work requires me to have on my phone on me all the time. I'm 24/7, 365 on call, right?
Yeah.
That that is adds enough stress to my life, right? My thing was I'm going to be gone. My phone's off. I'm experiencing the rest of the world, right? Whatever. And so, anyways, and I'd even told my wife, I'm like, don't call me. I will call you every night. But I don't want to be riding and have you call me and then go, oh, what does she want? What does she need? Right now, I'm thinking about that versus
Mm.
experiencing the ride, right?
Yep.
And so, anyway, so I text her at about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, South Lake Tahoe time, and I told her, I said, hey, I've turned my ringer on. Call me as soon as you get up. Okay.
Yep.
And my wife has a nursing background. Okay. So,
Oh, good.
I knew how I
Yeah.
was feeling, right? Whatever. Right. And so, anyways, she calls me and she's like, hey, what's up? And I said, I'm done. She goes, what? I said, I'm done. I said, I'm coming home. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, I feel like crap. I can't, this is like, I felt like the whole thing was falling apart. Right.
Yeah.
And immediately she goes, no, you're not. You're not coming home. She's
Mm.
like, take an extra day if you need it, whatever you need to do. She's like, you're not coming home.
Mm.
And that was absolutely what I needed to hear, right?
Yeah.
As much as I didn't want to hear it at the time, I am so thankful she said that, because I'd have been on an airplane that next day and back, right? I'd have been done.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, she's like, go to go to emergency room, go to a urgent care, right? Whatever, figure out what's going on, blah blah blah. And so I fell back asleep. I got up the next morning, and my next day I was supposed to be was going to finish in Carson City, Nevada.
Yep.
and it was a short ride, like 40 to 45 miles, something like that. Um, Half of it was uphill, half of it
Yeah.
was downhill.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like it shouldn't take me that long to get there. If I still feel bad when I get to Carson City, I'll get a, I'll go to an emergency room or I'll go to an urgent care. By the time I got up and I got dressed and got ready to ride, I'm like, I got to go here. Like I'm like I just and I don't get sick very often, right?
Mm,
I just felt like crap. So I went to the emergency room. They ran every test on they run for a mid 50s guy that has they can't breathe, right?
sure.
Chest x-rays, right? And there's a thing, I guess, that like um uh when you're at elevation and you're not used to that, you can get blood clots, right? So in your legs, so they tested for all that, right? So they did a lot of stuff, and basically they came back and they said, look, you need like they gave me an oral steroid, right? They're like, you have this massive sinus infection. Is basically the only thing we can find.
Mm,
They're like, you should probably take a week off of your trip, whatever, right? Blah 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 blah, right? And what was a weird thing was I was noticeably dehydrated, but they did not give me any sort of IV, which I thought was weird.
wow.
Yeah, but the reason I know I was dehydrated was when I went to the ER and they give you the forms to fill out, right? I couldn't I couldn't do anything with my hands and a pencil to do any sort of circle or any sort of letter or number with a curve in it.
You were in a tough spot there then. Wow.
Yeah, like I had lost like I could grip the handlebars, right? Like that wasn't a problem, right?
Yeah.
But just any sort of fine dexterity stuff like that with writing. And I noticed it the day before when I was signing a receipt, right, from dinner or whatever. And I'm like, that's kind of weird, whatever, right? I don't know. Okay, move on, right?
Yeah.
It was just like a whatever. And so, but it ended up, yeah. So I was dehydrated, had this massive head infection or nose infection, and so anyway, so I spent an extra day, was uh, which was kind of planned. Yeah, I'm trying to think. That was the next day. So I ended up spending kind of think 3 days there instead of just the two. I rode like 8 miles that day. So I get out of the ER, I go out, right,
Yeah.
and it's snowing. I'm like, oh great.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've got to, now I'm gonna ride in the snow. I rode like 8 miles up the lake and then got another hotel room and spent the night. But the oral steroid was exactly what I needed. It was perfect. It fixed me. So,
So
but
be going forward, and were you said part of that too was you weren't consuming enough food, maybe not consuming enough also hydration or salts or maybe, but so did you change anything moving forward because of that?
yeah, I did. I was doing some of the like electrolyte tablets, right?
Yeah.
Like on a couple of hot days, but I wasn't doing them on a regular basis. I started doing them at the end of every ride, right?
Okay.
Just to try to rehydrate more. And I was trying to make better decisions about eating more, right?
Yeah.
And type of stuff. So, but so anyway, so that I did make a little bit of a change there, but I was kind of behind the eight ball, if you
Yeah.
will, right? I ended up losing like 21 pounds over the trip.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but that was so when my wife when it came to Steamboat Springs, when I met her there, she gave me a hug, and that was the first thing she said. She's like, "Wow, you have lost a lot of weight."
Yeah, because if somebody doesn't see you in a while, you don't notice it. You're probably not even looking in a mirror that often,
Right.
except for, a restroom here or there, but
Exactly.
you're
Right.
not seeing the drastic like she would see it because she hadn't
Yeah.
seen you in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so Craig,
I noticed it sleeping at night because I'm a side sleeper.
oh,
Right.
okay.
And I noticed it because I'm like, yeah, wow, like my hip bone is like hitting the
Yeah,
ground. You know what I mean? Like, my shoulder is like, oh yeah, like that fat there's not there anymore. So I noticed it kind of through that
yeah,
process. Yeah.
wow. So looking at all this and what you've been through and what you've done, would you give it another run? Would you do it again? Like if you were like not maybe not this year, but next year or the year after, whatever, would you based on what you learned, would you do it again? Or would you do more of a direct route or something?
So, um, so yes, I would definitely do it again, right?
Yeah,
And I think I'm back at a minimum. I'm back to doing one of the planned routes, right?
yeah,
Planned cross country routes again when I'm 65, right? When I retire, right? The year I
okay,
retire. Okay. With that said, I do plan to continue my planned route. So next year, my older brother is planning to retire and he
okay,
wants to go out west. Now
okay.
he's not a cyclist, but again, so where I stopped, I was a day's ride away from Wyoming.
Oh,
Okay,
wow. Okay.
which was my mental block, right?
Yeah,
And my was causing that thought process was causing my issues of waking up with panic
yeah.
attacks. Right? That was what was going through my head. Was
Okay.
how am I going to get across Wyoming?
Yeah,
And because the days were super long, Wyoming has the least number of people in it, right? It just, all
yeah.
this being out in the middle of nowhere by yourself, right, was just getting to me. So I next year I hope to take a couple of weeks and with my brother out in the area. He doesn't have to follow me around by any means, right?
Yeah.
But being out in the area on his tour out west, I hope to go back to Steamboat. I'll fly into that area and then go back to Steamboat and then leave from there and continue my way on my
Nice.
my original plan, on my original path. So yeah,
That's
with
good. No, that was the other question I had. So to do it, so yeah, because when I was in Kokomo, Indiana, I stayed on a farm with a couple, and they did a cross country in 4 years.
right,
And
right,
and so when I listened to their story and I got to the end, they got, shared everything with me because I learned a lot about um, some of the route they took and the routes that the reasons why and things like that. So experienced cyclists, you're always learning something.
right.
But then after at the very end, I turned to both of them. I said, would you do it again, but once through? And they said, we do it again, but 4 years. We would still do the 4 year thing. We would still not. They still said that that was all they really wanted to do.
Right.
And you know what? At the end of the day, I think it's more about enjoyment, anyways.
It
And like,
really is.
yeah,
Yeah. I we on my son and I's podcast that we have, he does a lot of long distance stuff now. He's really gotten into this Ron Denor group, right? And they're
yeah,
doing so over the last month, he did a 300K. Yeah, it was 300K in 24 hours, right?
wow,
Yeah. So, and it had like 11,000 feet of climbing in it, right? So he did that. And then he's also just last weekend did a 24-hour ride. And I can't remember how many K it was, but it was about the whole European Ronde Nord thing is just, they've got all these goofy setups
yeah,
for these rides and whatever else. Anyways, so, and it was a group of five and you have to stay together, right? You have to, ride together kind of thing where the other thing was you could do your own on your own. But anyways,
yeah,
the point to that being is that he's more into the distance, right, and doing that. I am 100% into it for the adventure, right? Whether that be 20 miles in a cool campsite at the end,
yeah,
or 300 miles across 6 7 days, right?
yeah.
One of the guys that we interviewed on our podcast, he's a big Ron Denor guy, and he mentioned he's like if what makes you happy is riding your bike 2 miles to the coffee shop, having a coffee and ride back, that's what you should do because
Exactly
that's what
right.
makes you, yeah. So yeah, like I say, I'm hoping I can continue the route, um, and all of my opinions have changed.
Yeah,
That is kind of come out of this. When we rode the Katy Trail, when Hart and I rode the Katy Trail a few years ago, there was a couple who was walking across the U.S. Right,
oh wow.
and what they would do is they had a camper, right, a car camper or camper pulled by their car, and the first person would walk 20 miles or whatever. The second person would take that camper in the car 20 miles, stop there. They would start walking 20 miles. So the other person would then pick up the car, right? And drive to
Yeah.
so basically they're covering like 40 miles a day, right?
Yeah.
But they're each only walking like half of that. And so I
Yeah. Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
remember Hart looking at me and going, "So would you consider that walking across the?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. No." They're absolutely not walking across the US. But now that I've
Yeah.
experienced this, I'm like, yeah, yeah, you are. Yeah, you're doing what makes you happy, right? You're doing what your thing, right?
Exactly.
It absolutely counts. So,
We have held ourselves up to a standard sometimes that brings us to suffering and misery, when at the end of the day, it's all about the joy of life and the
yep,
experience of it. And, like you said, I put my thumb out a couple of times. We had one time when it was a Navajo Indian driving a pickup truck that pulled over, and he told us, he goes, "You think you're near the top of the hills? You got more hills up there." It didn't take me long to kind of like say, okay, and put the
yep,
bike in the back of the truck. But honestly, it's the adventure, and it doesn't matter. Like you shared the two couple trading
yeah,
off, and
yep,
it's really about having the joy of the adventure, the meeting the people like you shared,
yep.
and you're not sitting on a couch.
That's exactly right.
You did something. You're not sitting on a couch. You had something. So wow, this has been great, Craig. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the challenge with that is that um when I am sitting on the couch, I'm watching YouTube, right? And I'm
yeah,
watching people cycle, right? No one posts failures, right? For the most part, right?
yeah,
Everyone's making the goal, right?
yeah,
Everyone's beating the time that they set out to beat, right? Like whatever. And and I was a couple of things that, I was really, and I try not to use the word depressed because I don't, but I guess I was depressed, right? When I got
yeah,
done, because I'm like, I didn't make my goal, right? I'm back home. I got to go back to work, right? I mean, there's just like all these things, right? Just
all those
all these,
things, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. People are gonna ask why I quit, right? People are gonna ask, and I had a half a dozen very valid reasons for quitting. I really did, right?
yeah.
Like there was stuff going on at home that I didn't realize before, right? Or hadn't planned on, and there's just a lot of things, right? And the other thing that kind of came out of it, as I mentioned, right, I try to put a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I really enjoy the editing process because
Yeah.
it's my creative outlet, if you will, right? It's kind of
Uh-huh.
my, right? I got back, I didn't want to edit for whatever reason. I'm like,
Yeah.
like for months, and eventually it clicked in my head. I'm like, I had this story written before I left,
Hmm.
right? Start in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Bridge, finish at the Statue of Liberty in New York City, right? Like
Hmm.
I had that whole thing basically written in my head. I had no ending.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, and like not even how to end it, once I realized, oh, that's what's keeping me from editing, like it was a light bulb. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, I just got to have a different ending. And I didn't
Yeah.
realize that I had completely written how that whole thing was going to happen in my head.
So, Craig, your story is the most relatable of all stories because over hundreds of thousands of people, number one, would never get out the couch. They would never get out the door. They would never even think about it, right?
Right.
But what you relate to is there's so many people who do get started, and for one other reason, whether it's difficulty, and it can be anything. It could be hiking, it could be biking, it could be starting a business, it could be starting a podcast, it could be so many things. We get in our heads sometimes and we talk ourselves out of it. But what I like about what the way you're sharing that, you're you're authentic. You're telling that exactly what you went through, even the sickness. I mean, I'm surprised that you only had one flat tire. That to me blows me away. But I think it's encouraging because most people don't want to just hear successes. They want to understand what were the challenges. And I think that's the truest part of, because everybody wants to do something, but they risk that feeling of failure, so they never even start.
Right. Yeah,
They never
absolutely.
even start. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Any journey worth, and I'm sure someone's written this somewhere and I've read it or whatever, but really any journey worth taking, you're going to have failures, right?
yeah,
If one of the guys I work with, and I'm trying to remember exactly how he said this, but he's like, if you were able to do that from start to finish, your goal probably wasn't high enough,
uh,
right? Like,
yeah,
what's the point? Yeah, yeah. It's like, okay, well, my goal is to walk from here to the couch and back. What's the point in setting that goal? Because we know we can do it, right?
yeah,
Like, you know, set the goal high enough that it's super challenging. And if you get there, outstanding, great,
yeah,
right? But, you know, and anything, again, anything worth doing like that, you're gonna come across challenges.
yeah,
But if you're out west, use your thumb. Those challenges, people will help you through. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And,
The
and
experience of meeting these people is
if you
amazing.
stay at a warm showers, ask for pasta.
Yes,
I love
yes,
it.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's that's an incredible organization. They also have a very good podcast. I don't know if you've listened to their podcast or not, but they interview people who've toured all over the world and spent time in warm showers. And I one of my warm showers hosts they because I ended it was shortly after I got sick. A couple of days after I got sick, so my original request date got bumped back, and they were nice enough to kind of reschedule and allow for that.
Yeah.
But I got there, and they both had plans that evening, and they left, and they
Oh,
just
wow.
and I'm hanging out in their house, right? Just me and the cat.
Yeah.
So and it was just but I'd met them and talked to them for like maybe an hour. And if they walked into my house today, like I feel like I'd know them, right? It just,
Yeah.
although such a short amount of time, was spent, it just, and same as you and me, right? I mean, we've physically been in the same place for maybe 15 minutes, right?
Maybe 15 minutes, and then it started raining and we had to move. And then
Right, right.
all I remember was getting I think a text from you saying, "Did you have to go through that same detour that we went through?" That that was the worst ever. That was like, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, but it just the bike just connects people. It really
it
does.
does.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool that
Yeah.
does a lot of things, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Now, your YouTube channel. How do people find your YouTube channel and then the podcast?
all right, yeah, absolutely. So the podcast is the On My Bike podcast.
Okay.
Okay,
It's on
and
Apple, right?
it is on Apple and on Spotify,
On
both.
Spotify too. Okay.
Yep. Um, the YouTube channel is, and I created this name before I realized shorter would have been better. But so the YouTube channel is Ohio Rail Trail Routes Roads.
Wow, that's even longer than raising the consciousness of humanity. But no, that's good. You'll find it. You won't confuse it with another channel.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, so the original thought was to try to get so many people want to ride just rail trails,
Yeah,
right? And which is great. Ohio has a great set of rail trails, and a lot of states out in the Midwest and East do. Um, but you're limiting yourself, right?
yeah,
Learn to ride on the roads, learn what roads are safe and what roads aren't,
yeah,
learn to ride on those roads. I'm not saying be super comfortable on the roads, but certainly be cautious, right? But, bikes are traffic, right? You don't have to you don't have to ditch into the ditch every time a car comes by. You have as much right to that road as they do. Um, and so I my original thought for the YouTube channel was to try to combine a lot of very popular rail trails in Ohio with rideable roads to create these 4 to 6 day adventures. And I've only done that a couple times, and then this trip came up, and so I'm a couple of trips behind in editing. So, but there will be more stuff out there as we go. So,
That is great. So if anybody who is listening from the Ohio area or wants to do or in the area that wants to do the some of those rides, could they reach out to you through your YouTube channel?
oh, absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Nice.
Yeah, I could talk about biking forever. So, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
me too. It's
yeah.
yeah,
So, and I'm actually leading a group here out of Granville. At the end of the month, we're going bike packing, and a couple people that'll be their first trip. Yeah,
nice.
yep. It'll be 60 miles out, camp, 60 miles back. A couple of meals between here and there, and it'll be fun. So,
That's fun when you get to help and organize those too. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So,
Wow. Well, Craig, I really appreciate your time. We can go on forever. I know
yep,
we're going to be connected again. Let's just stay in touch. And I feel like, what you added to the essence of raising the consciousness of humanity is everybody has a passion, right? And we need to go out there and do it. And we need to know that, yeah, we'll have things that might be roadblocks, but it never stops us from dreaming and from doing whatever that next thing is. So, yeah, I really appreciate it, Craig.
absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.